Hello, and welcome back to a very fun episode of Beyond Dimensional. We are your hosts. I'm Liz.
Hi, Lori.
And we are welcoming two guests today. We are very excited to be talking to them. They're fascinating, they're full of knowledge and full of witchy wisdom. So, this is Shaun and Claire of Silvercrow, who are fabulously gifted. They're a team who jumped on their broomsticks all the way from Nottingham in the UK. They work with natural magic, with the energies of the earth, of plants, and in harmony with nature in order to help people with a wide range of issues. We would describe Shaun as a chef de magie, concocting spells, stirring his cauldron of green goodies, all for the greater good of humanity. Claire as his partner, both in business and in life, make the duo a full-blown success. So we are very lucky to have them with us. Please welcome the incredibly talented team, Shaun and Claire of Silvercrow.
Thank you.
Wow, what an intro.
That is a great intro. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm glad my off-the-cuff morning non-coffee was able to get them out. Thank you guys so much for being here. This is so wonderful to talk to you again. I know Lori and I just were enthralled with our previous chats with you, and we just could not be more excited. All right, we have to ask, just to start us off, I did not mention in the intro, so Shaun, you actually describe yourself as a green witch. I don't know which witch is which on any witch. So what does that mean?
Green witch is essentially, all witches tend to be sort of in tune with nature, and all witches tend to enjoy being in the natural world and using sort of natural magic. The difference between green witches and other types of witches are that green witches are predominantly, we use plant magic, essentially. We use plant-based magic. Other witches might use sort of crystal magic, or they might use the sort of elements like weather or whatever it is. But with green witches, we tend to use herbal magic. We do a lot of kind of herbal remedies, natural medicines. But with green witch, we do herb law. So herb laws kind of like we treat plants as though they're living beings, which they are. You know, we treat them as living beings rather than just things. So green witchcraft is kind of a balance between balancing ourselves and balancing ourselves with the natural world. So we sort of use the cycles of nature, and all of our magical practices are based around the cycles of nature. So that's kind
I have a question for you. We had a guest on. She talked a little bit about plants as living beings, and she said there's been studies where, you know, if an animal comes and starts chewing up a tree, it can send messages or signals to the trees around it and say, hey, get ready, poison your leaves or do this or that. Is that really a thing? It never crossed my mind that was a thing.
Yeah, plants are sentient beings, and so they sense people or other animals around them, and they give off chemical signals, and the signals that they give off will be picked up by other plants. And if trees will send it through the mycelium level under the soil, and that's kind of like the wood wide web that sort of connects all of the plants and trees up. And it will just send messages backwards and forwards, and they can support other trees. By a tree that's not getting enough sunlight, they can sort of support other trees to move foliage around so that the sunlight gets to that tree that's not getting enough. You know, just plants as well. They have chemical signals to say, you know, there's people around, or there's animals around that you know are touching the plants or whatever. So
I'm getting this
chemical signal.
I'm getting this very clear image of like Avatar, the movie.
Yeah.
Where everything is glowing and they're all touching each other and talking, and like the tree of life and all this.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? I think there's so much to do with energy and vibration as well. And obviously there's a lot of things on different levels that we can't see. You know, we can't see every kind of vibration. We can't hear every kind of vibration. I think that is one of the vibrations that we're unable to tune into because we're not plants ourselves. But yeah, I know that there has been more scientific research into that area, and definitely there's all kinds of they sing, and they've had mushrooms and things that they you know, nodes into, and they can hear the sounds of all kinds of things. They're always talking, which are probably why people say to talk to plants, and that will help them to grow, is because on some level that being vibration, I suppose, that we're giving off with what we're saying, when we're around them, is actually going to enhance their growth and everything as well.
They do respond to vibration. They do respond to sort of positive and negative vibrations, and each plant will have its own sort of biofeedback and its own unique kind of biosignature. Other plants will be able to distinguish between certain other plants, like different types of plants. So they'll be able to determine which types of plants are, trying to signal. So yeah, it's fascinating. It is
amazing. I know we haven't even really asked you how you got here, but we'll get to that. I'm so intrigued by the concept here. So from what you're explaining, then the energy, the vibration, the treatment of the plant, similarly to our food that we eat, let's say, a cow that is raised in Japan and Wagyu and massaged and all of that, it increases the quality and the nutrition for the human consumption part.
Yeah.
Would that still, organic, high, more quality treatment of the plants does actually stand to reason. So is that still the case for you as well, where you're like, hey, I know you have your own garden, I imagine, so you create your own recipes there?
Indoor and outdoor. Yeah, we have a lot of indoor plants as well. But you see plants as living beings, and when you're treating them as living beings rather than just things, then you start to treat them as you would treat other living beings, as you would treat an animal or as you would treat people. You start to have a greater depth of respect for them, so you interact with them, I guess, in that way.
Whereas outside as well, because obviously foraging is a really big part of this as well, because we obviously can't have every single herb type growing in our house or garden. I mean, that would be the dream. Otherwise, we get to kind of go out and forage. And obviously, the other sort of part of this is the kind of urban green wet side, which feels like a very stark contrast. Actually, if you know what you're looking for and you know what things are, which to be fair is not my repertoire, that's his. I'm always pointing to that. Is that okay? Is that okay? Is this good? What does that do? But yeah. So even just in the kind of like the urban environment that we're in, we're in a very sort of like built up area. There's essentially like pavement herbs, I would call them. They're growing out of the cracks or they're in the verges and stuff. And, especially in the summer, a couple of months ago, we went on a short walk around the area and there was, like 9, 10, something like that, herbs just in our vicinity that we just
like a 10-minute walk, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then we dried them out. And now they're part of the big cupboard of jars of herbs.
Yeah.
For using
So
it.
fun.
So, there's a lot out there.
Okay, so maybe strange question, and I'll probably ask a lot of strange questions.
That's all good.
Do the plants speak to you? So you're speaking to them and, you're doing what you're doing. Is there any type of communication, whether it's actual speaking to or like vibrational connection, energy connection
I think
between the two?
If they speak, then we don't hear them or understand their voices.
Okay.
But it's more the fact how they respond to how you are around them. They tend to respond in certain ways, and it's things like, as we've had various different plants for years that we've kind of grown from babies. And
and like really good.
And like
wild story.
An aloe plant I had from a tiny little shoot that was about, I don't know, probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And I looked after it and it kind of grew into a nice sort of sized aloe plant. And then how long was it? About 2 years ago?
About 2 and 2.5 years.
About 2.5 years ago, before me and Claire were together, we're friends at that point, and I sent Claire a cutting from this plant down to hers. And she kind of potted it up and grew it, and it grew. It was growing okay. When she moved up here and we brought it together, we put the baby plant and the original plant next to each other.
Mother plant,
and the baby plant thrived.
Oh my God, it's just had so many babies.
It's ridiculous.
Wow. The growth with
the colours changed and everything, hasn't it? The colours changed.
Probably double back where it originally from, and potentially exactly that, like putting like 2 animals back together. I think it's crazy. I would never have expected that. So that was a nice surprise. But
that's wild.
Yeah.
So essentially the way they communicate is through production or how they grow or the fruit that they produce, that type of thing. So you kind of get what you give.
Yeah, and
in that situation.
we're tactile with them. We kind of touch the leaves and we'll sort of, we'll touch them and talk to them and water them. And as we're kind of caring for them in a normal way, we're kind of talking to them and touching the leaves. And they actually sense that we're here and that we're, how much they sense, who knows? But clear that they do sense something from us. Yeah.
I'm super concerned about my karma. because I can't keep a plant alive. So it's like, okay, great.
It would be for that. Try Tradescantia. You look that up. It's like, I mean, there's lots of different ones I was the same when I first started. A friend of mine gave me some cuttings and I was like in high panic mode. I can't look after these. Tradescantia is hard to kill and easy to thrive. It's
Okay.
beautifully glittery as well. I can't believe that nature produces a plant that looks like it's got glittery nails on the leaves, but it does. So that would be my tip to you. That'll make you feel really confident and happy.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
just
like-
traumatized by this.
That's the gateway plant. I get it. Okay. So to like really give you the feels, and then all of a sudden you're going to you're like, I can do this now. And then like you grab another plant. And
It's a confidence builder, that one. For sure.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, well, I have 2 black thumbs, so I'm with Lori, but we'll leave all that the green magic to you. Okay, so now tell us the origin story here. How did you guys get to, creating Silvercrow?
I mean, I've been practicing as a witch for a long time, and I kind of grew up into it, I guess, to a degree. So it was something that had always been with me, really. It was from really young, but I kind of fell in and out of it over the years, and then sort of over the past 10 years or maybe a bit less, I kind of lent heavily into it. That was just like a private thing. I'd never sort of shared it with anyone. Nobody else knew I was a witch, and it was not something I ever spoke about. I still had a normal sort of day job. I was in sort of my own private practice. Then it was only probably, I don't know, 3 years ago, maybe, I started to kind of talk about this in a public way, really. And then the more I spoke about it, the more I realized, people are interested in this stuff. People are fascinated by it. And it was just something that I'd always done. So it wasn't really anything new to me, but I realized it was new to a lot of people. So I kind of started putting the sort of wheels in motion, I guess, for teaching. I developed courses and workshops and started to do spells for people. People would call me and ask, and they'd sort of blurt out their life stories and ask me to do a spell to solve some issue that they had. And I realized that there was a kind of market for this. So I kind of started thinking about a business in that at that point. And then probably, I don't know, maybe a year, no, probably a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, I sort of just, Claire and myself, we were part of an online sort of networking group that Claire had developed. And we, I sort of put a post up there and just said, I'm looking for a witch name. Anyone got any ideas? And somebody kind of came up with Silvercrow, because I had like the affinity for crows and ravens, and I kind of identified with Odin, the Norse god. So his crow was kind of stuck, and that was that really.
Yeah, it was a sense of, I think, when we first met through the networking and stuff, it was for both their kind of, talking about, funnily enough, we've got this weird alignment of so many things before we met, and like a whole life that echoes. So we both were in teaching, we both were website and graphic designers, and then you sort of slipped it in almost like a kind of secret, like, oh, and by the way, you're a witch, and we were all like, what? You need to tell us more. So I feel like I've been the encourager of kind of taking it more seriously and like, tell us more, or actually kind of being that, because I'm totally new to this world as well.
Yeah.
And I think that that's helped as well, because he'll say stuff that he knows about, or, to do with witches, or whether it's ancient wisdom or anything. And I'll be like, whoa, I don't know what you're talking, what do you mean? And like, I'll ask the silly questions. And I think that kind of reminds you in that teaching way of like, okay, I need to dial it down a bit, because it's all very well having conversations with other fellow witches, which you do when you do your Twitter spaces and stuff through the crow's nest. But for newbies and for people coming into it, and potentially the people that would want to do the courses and the workshops, it's like, okay, how can we get this into a kind of bite-sized, straightforward a way to put those things across? But certainly I think it gave, us then obviously going from being sort of like business networky colleagues and stuff to then actually being together, it became like, well, why don't we do this more seriously and get more focused as well? It's actually been a really perfect synergy of our skills, our actual practical skills and experience. But
it's weird for me, because it was just a lifestyle thing for me. It wasn't really something I saw as a business particularly, or something that I was even intending to do as a business at one point. It was just something I did. I would come home when I was working as a designer. Before I set my business up, I was I was, I'd come home and I'd just do a spell for something, or I'd do some ritual or whatever. It was just something I did.
But
So
where did you learn how to do all of it? How did this? I think it came when you were a child. You learned it from your mother. Was that right?
he was kind of like loose practitioner, I guess. She was sort of in her teens when she had me, so she was still living at home, and it was like in the 70s, and at the time there was a bit of a resurgence with Wicca, which is like the religious side of witchcraft, and that was like a new, like what people would call kind of new age witchcraft. It was kind of brought about in the 1930s, and then it just had a resurgence in sort of the 60s and 70s. So it was kind of a fashionable thing, I guess, at the time. And my mum was sort of dabbling in it, but didn't really take it serious. She didn't really practice as I practice. But I grew up around the paraphernalia, watching her do sort of tarot cards and reading spell books and whatever. So I kind of knew that she did this stuff. But I think the reason I kind of got into it really was because of folklore. I was fascinated by folklore as a kid. I read loads of stories about sort of Norse mythology and Greek and Roman and African and Slavic and all different cultures. And I was fascinated by it all, by monsters and gods and goddesses and whatever. So yeah, so it kind of started from there, and then as I grew older, I realized that there was a lot of kind of synergy between all of that sort of mythical world and the world of witchcraft. And I also realized that all of the sort of fairy tales, folklore, and nursery rhymes, and all of those things are actually coded messages of actual knowledge, from history. So then that became even more fascinating. And that's how I dug even further into it. And that led to other sorts of magical practice. And then that led to others. And gradually, just over the years, it just sort of grew and grew and grew from there, really.
So what gifts do you say that you have? And again, I say this on every podcast. Everybody has gifts, whether we've learned to use them or not. Are you highly intuitive? Are you a medium? Are you a psychic? What do you consider yourself under the realm of witch?
I wouldn't consider myself a psychic, really. I have, I guess you would call it clear aliens, the sort of sense of smell. And it tends to happen if I'm doing something to do with spirit. If I do a ritual where it's for people who have passed over, and usually it's us, people who are left behind, the family members ask me to do it, and they'll give me the first name of the person who's passed, and then I hold this ritual, and it's kind of like, I guess the only way I can describe it is kind of like an energetic hand holding. The thing when someone passes away is the people that are left behind are cone or frightened, or were they afraid when they died, or were they, are they confused about where they're going, and all of this kind of thing. And it's sort of partly for the people left behind and also partly for the person that's passed. So I do this ritual, and I kind of connect with the spirit of whoever's passed. And what I tend to get from when that happens, what I tend to get is I get like a sense of smell, and it'll be always an aroma that is to do with the person. Even I don't know this at the time; it's only afterwards when I feed it back to the family members. And it can be anything, but it's not. It doesn't come through my nose. It's kind of like it's behind my head. It's like a smell that seems to originate behind my head, and that's how I know the difference between sort of normal smells and then like a spirit smell, because it comes from here. And it's kind of like I guess it's like a wave that comes usually from my left side and sort of around the back of my head. And it sort of tingles, sort of like, you get like ASMR tingles down the back of your neck. It's kind of like that, but there's an aroma that comes with it that I must process in my brain somewhere, but it doesn't come through my nose.
Wow.
And so it's two separate types of smells. I could smell something in the room at the same time as something here, and it's completely separate.
Is that always the same smell? Because it's also your spider sense, right? It's your spidey sense telling you there's a spirit there, and it's always the same, or
the smells are all specific to whoever's passed. One I did a one a while ago, and that was for somebody's dog had passed away, and they were really close to this dog, and they asked me to do this for the dog, and they gave me the dog's name, and I kind of did this ritual, and I got like, again from behind me, I got like this smell of hyacinths, like fresh hyacinths. And also, you know how you get that kind of twitchy eye sometimes if you're tired and your eye twitches really quickly? I had that sensation in my knee. So it was like a really fast pulse in my knee. And then I carried on the ritual, finished the ritual. And at the end of it, I was talking to the owner of the dog. I was telling her this stuff. And she started to cry, and she said the night that the dog was called Boss, the night that Boss died, she was away on business and she'd left him with her sister to look after. And he was at her sister's house. And because he was old and his legs weren't working very well, the sister had put him in his bed in the kitchen. It was kind of all on the ground level. And she'd stayed in the sitting room, like next to the kitchen, so she could be there and tend to it. And on the dining table in the kitchen, there was a vase with freshly cut hyacinths in. And I didn't know this until I told her this. And then I told her about the sort of tapping on my knee. She said when he was well and he was able to run around, when he wanted to play, he would sort of nudge her knee with his nose. So it was kind of like, it was kind of like a confirmation in that sort of sense.
Well,
so yeah.
Yeah. I'm not very up on the lingo. Right? You're medium, you're psychic, you're this or whatever. I don't know. I have clairs and I don't know what they're called and whatever. But the clair that you feel, like we're outside of sense, I don't know what it's called. I'll have to look it up.
It's clear sentience, isn't it?
I was going to say sentient. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what you have also, because that to me connects to that.
Yeah, but it does. I don't always get that. It's only certain times I get that. I always get the smell of some kind, and it can be a smell of cigars, it can be a smell of flowers or perfume or some kind of food or something. It will be always like a smell of like a specific smell. Occasionally, I get the sort of sentient type feeling, but sometimes it's in my arms, sometimes in my shoulder, or on the back of my neck, or I've had it in my foot before. It changes. It's in different places.
We definitely want to dive into the casting of spells and the rituals. We'll have to focus that on a part 2 because there's just so much to dive into. But understanding your gift, did that happen early on? I'm really curious because I love that you said you were just a curious kid and you were fascinated by Norse mythology and the Greeks and all of these. And I'm just thinking about my husband right now, who is the biggest skeptic of all time, but he's obsessed with those things. And he's like, I wish they were real. Are you kidding? I would love to be Harry Potter. Like that would be his dream, is to be a magician. And I'm so curious, like what brought you over the line from fun kid who really was into the fun mystical side of the stories to, oh no, this is actually a real thing that I smell, whatever that is, and can conduct as an energetic force.
Yeah. It didn't happen when I was young. Over the years, I kind of, because you can learn to develop your sort of clear senses, and you can do various things to sort of develop those senses. Something I developed later on in life, and I think really it kicked in after my dad died. So it was about 11 years ago. So he passed away, and he was only 57 at the time. So it was like really sudden, really unexpected. And so it was a huge wrench to our family. And I think at that time I was sort of reconnecting with my sort of witchcrafty stuff again, and I was spending a lot of time outdoors. I was teaching at the time as well, and it was highly stressful and stuff. So I came home and I would do sort of outdoor stuff. I would go out and I would spend time with plants and spend time in nature, just ways of calming down, really, of de-stressing at that point. I'd go and do sort of grounding and walking and things like that. So it kind of all happened round about that time. And then when my dad passed away, the night he passed away, we didn't find him until the following morning. He was supposed to be taking my daughter to drop my daughter off with him. And he was one of these people that was always up at sort of early hours of the morning. He was sort of straight up. As soon as the sun came up, he was up. And we got there, and the blinds were all closed and the door was locked still. And I was ringing his mobile, no answer. And I had to kind of break the door down, and then I found him. So it was not till the next morning. But the night before, I smelt cigars. I smelt this kind of behind me kind of cigar smell.
Wow.
And at the time, I didn't connect it up. I didn't realize that that's what it was. And it's only since I've done these sorts of rituals since, and I've witnessed this kind of behind my head kind of smell. I've realized what that was, but I didn't know at the time. So the first time I noticed it anyway was about that.
Wow.
It's so interesting because a lot of people that we talk to, and similar to my experience, they might have had a certain connection as a kid or had certain experiences as a kid, and some of them kept that their whole life, but a lot of us seem to have really developed later in life or a little bit later in adulthood, which I think is really fascinating. It's like there's a trigger or something happens where for whatever reason, everything starts to come forward in a way that we recognize and can use. And sometimes I believe and I see really when I'm reading people that the person that's passed, either they were the ones with the gift and they're like, okay, now you're going to use this. I'm passing, and I'm passing it to you. You're going to take this on. I'm going to make sure you have this experience because you're meant to. There's some other traumatic trigger, just the death, right? Itself. So anyway, I think it's really, really fascinating how we go through this period where kids see things regardless of whether, they talk about it ever or remember it, they have that connection because the veil is thinner, for lack of a better analogy, right?
Yeah.
But that goes to everybody has the gift and ability. It's whether you tap into it or you're pushed and tapped into it by someone or something, an experience, etc.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my little rabbit hole for today.
My kind of like way into this hasn't necessarily been through the witch stuff, but mine was more of a spiritual awakening, which must have happened over a decade ago, probably a little bit longer. And I was working in a really highly stressful job, and I had a lot of like back tension and everything. And so people suggested me to go and do yoga. And so I joined a yoga class, and I really liked the bit where you just laid down. It was like the relaxing part. And so actually when I spoke to the instructor, she was like, well, that's kind of like meditation. And she referred me to a meditation teacher who I was going to for years, every other week. And it was a massive jump in everything. I had no idea. I remember trying to like do Om chants for the first time, and it just felt so strange. It's like, what am I doing? I'm one of those hippies, but the layering, like I did crystal therapy, like training, I did Reiki training. I set that up as a business for a short time as well. And sort of that's why I very much came into my understanding of there being more to this world than the sort of 3D version that that we're sort of conditioned into, as you were saying, for most of our lives. My kind of the lid came off for me more in a spiritual way, rather than a witchcraft way. But there are some echoes and there are some overlaps for sure, certainly in the energy way and certainly in working, like, so the sort of the bits and pieces that you use and stuff like that. But I think there's a nice sort of a nice way that they can kind of interact. I think people think that there's a lot of connotations obviously of witch that is true. And that's part of what we do a lot of, is trying to dispel. And I think for me, I certainly have been more triggered by the words and the language and the rituals and stuff, all the kind of everything about it, because I've started to learn now, oh, it's not this, it's that. Oh, okay, this works with this. And so it does take time, but both of those routes, you have to be open to the fact that there might be something more than what the everyday of things. And actually, as you speak a lot of in terms of this history of stuff, we consider now to be alternative, under the alternative or the esoteric banner, was just the way it was done for thousands of years. And it's actually such a small window that we're into sort of the pharmaceuticals and the technological age and the industrial age. This is tiny in our human timeline. And I think that that's been such an interesting thing. And that's still, I'm very much learning that, and, starting to read the books and look at the history of kind of where witchcraft fits within the history and the timeline of just all of human existence, really.
Well, apparently we have many lifetimes to just revisit all of these things, but that's a whole other topic. But yeah.
So before we move on, because I know we gotta get to, letting everyone go and plan for episode 2, but past lives. When people tell me, as a kid, I was into folklore, I was into mysticism, I was into whatever, I believe that connection often comes from a past life experience.
Yeah.
And that, it comes out in this lifetime. So for example, you had that interest because you had a life during those times, or multiple. I hear multiple, actually, like 10, 15.
Yeah.
So multiple lives during those periods. And then it shows up at some point, in this life. It's almost like each life leaks into the other in some way.
And you maintain little bits of a previous life, and you don't know that that's the case, but unless you do sort of past life regression or something like that. But you don't know that there's bits of that previous life that you cling on to in the new life that you're in. And
they're your Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Easter eggs. Yes,
Easter eggs,
I think that's right.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
It is.
I had an interesting experience 8 years ago now, where all of a sudden, and I've always been interested in Buddhism. I think it's very fascinating as a religion, if we want to call it that, right? But I literally woke up one day and was like, I'm going to get tattoos, and they're going to all be Buddhist themes. And within 3 months, literally my whole back and a lot of my body is covered in Buddhas, sayings, scripts. And as I worked through that with a medium, I learned it's because I'd had like 4 lives as a Buddhist monk. But it was randomly, like, again, always interested in it, but not to the level of like my whole body needs to be representation of Buddhism. So anyway, moral of the story is, I think if people pay attention to the things that they see or feel or experience that might cause pause, there's probably something there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think you don't realize at the time, you just think it's something that you're interested in. And then it's only when you sort of dig more into this that you start to realize that there's a lot more there.
It also tends to come back around, I think.
Yeah, it does.
So I remember when I was like, I kind of had an interest, as we were saying, in sound healing. And I was like, great. And then I'd, read a book or like watch a, lecture on YouTube or whatever. And then I'd be like, yeah, I'll park it and get on with life. And then a year later, it would come back around. And I suddenly find myself, I was, God, I don't know what this is, but I really need to learn about this, or I need to buy this or whatever. And I ended up going on a course and stuff. And funnily enough, it hasn't really turned into anything more. It's kind of just, I appreciate sort of the vibrations, the solfeggio frequencies, all that stuff. But it's almost like I had to go and do this training, because it kind of all lessened after that. It was like, she's done now. Like, she got to the point. I think these things, they do come round and they keep poking at you. And obviously with this, we discussed it and you kind of mentioned something, and then it was around a few months before it passed. It's taken a while to actually come. It's like, it will not leave you alone. Like, we have to explore this and at least try and do it, see what happens. But I totally agree with you there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely.
Very cool. Now I'm like, that whole time I'm like, well, what are those things for me? What are my signs? What was I supposed to be doing? And I think honestly, this podcast is probably one of them. But not that we had, ancient podcasts, but maybe we did. The fun announcements, newsletters, radio back in the days.
When you're into learning and knowledge and expanding that, that's a lifelong thing. That will come out in this. This will come through your podcast. You'll want to learn, but you'll also want to teach, or you'll want to express that. You want to connect with people. And I think that's something that definitely, again, is something that a lot of people in this kind of community, whether it be spiritual, witch, whatever, they just want to learn. They just want more and more and more knowledge. We're not satisfied with just what we've been told.
Yeah.
Like, there must be more.
I think that's the thing. And it's like, that's the whole thing with connecting with nature more and stuff as well. Because nature's obviously been there before we were, like the sort of natural world has always existed. So I think connecting with nature, there are things that happen within nature and cycles and patterns and formations within nature that help you connect with the past that you don't know of, and that I find that fascinating in itself. And even things like the Akashic records, looking into the Akashic records is fascinating and sort of connecting, and that's where you can kind of then go off and sort of have experiences where you're recalling some of your past lives and stuff like that, which is fascinating in itself.
Oh man, that's a lot of information for my brain to try to understand, because I'm just like, I can't see it. I can't trust it. I can't see it.
My first experiences when I kind of, I think a lot of people have this kind of obsession when they first are into something or wake up or whatever you want to call it. And I remember going to like one of the crystal fairs, like kind of like the spiritual fairs, and just wanting to buy everything and absorb everything. And I remember going to a crystal store and saying to the person behind Guru, you know, like, which one should I get? And they're like, well, which one do you feel drawn to? I was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, well, whichever one you're drawn to is the one you need. And I was like, please, like, you tell me, you're the expert. I'm coming to you for advice. It's not how we always go to experts, whether they be in white coats or we were teachers, so we understand from that perspective, you know, a teacher knows best. And I was like, how are you standing there selling this to me and you won't tell me which one I need? And it wasn't until so much later that I was like, absolutely, that actually was perfect advice.
Yeah.
Because you will be drawn to the book, the person, you know, crystal, the plant, the herb, you know, whatever it is, you will intuitively be drawn to it. So I'm sure there would be a point where your intuition will take over.
Yeah.
That distrusting voice will get quieter and the trusting voice will get louder, and you'll start to go with your gut on things, I'm sure.
Well, I will tell you that is partly the case of what happened with me and Lori, and that's likely why we are here doing this, because when you were telling the story of how you and Shaun connected originally, and then how your partnership, minus the romance, that's pretty much me and Lori. You know, we were partners in crime for a lot of different things in our lives. But I would be remiss if I did not mention before the end of this episode that, Shaun, you found an extra Claire for yourself, and you get to keep it all to yourself. No one else gets this Claire, and that's so cool. You know, that's a pretty cool gift. Yeah, well, this has just been great getting to know your backstories. I cannot wait to dive into casting spells. We've already talked about dispelling things. Now we want to put spells on to stuff. We will leave everyone at the edge of their seat, and we will come back in part 2 and discover all about spell casting, everybody. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Shaun and Claire, for being here. We can't wait to talk to you more. All right, we will see you soon.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.